How's it going, everyone? And welcome back to another episode of the Geeky Gentleman, the podcast for all your geeky needs, fashion, and lifestyle tips, all rolled together in one perfectly packaged podcast. Support for today's episode of the Geeky Gentleman is brought to you by Manscaped, who are the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. So today is a very special episode. It is my first interview ever with someone who actually works at Marvel. That's right, guys. Actually works at Marvel. Can you believe it? Like Marvel. In today's episode, I'm welcoming Terry Blas, an illustrator and writer behind the viral webcomic You Say Latino. He's also written comics for Ariana Grande and the series Steven Universe and Rick and Morty. His original graphic novels are Deadweight, Murder at Camp Bloom, Hotel Dare, and Lifetime Passes. And of course, he's currently the writer for the Marvel series Reptil. Alrighty then, enough said, let's jump right into the podcast. Hi there, Terry, and welcome to the Geeky Gentleman. I am so happy to have you here. Thank you so much for taking the Zoom call with me.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so happy to be here and to chat with you and to hang out.
So where are you calling from right now? Where are you? Not that people can come stalk you, but not your zip code.
I'm in the state of Oregon.
Okay.
I'm near the city of Portland. Yeah. I live right outside Portland. It's a very big comics town. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but Image, Oni Press, Dark Horse, they're all located here. So a lot of comics people live here.
I know Dark Horse because they did the Buffy comic book.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
now it's with Boom, I believe. Yep.
Yeah, I definitely was reading that when Season 7 ended, and I was just sad. I was like, I need more. And then I was like, ooh,
You're
Dark
like,
Horse. Dark Horse comics.
You're like, why is Dawn a centaur?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think I went all the way. I haven't kept up with them, but I think I made it all the way to the end of the 8th season, which in the comic book form.
How far I got.
And then I actually got the moving comic DVD, the motion comic, where you can see it, and then I just got really upset because it's not even the entire season 8. I was like, why isn't it the entire season? What is this? A third of this season motion? I need the rest.
Right.
And that's where I stopped. The anger of that made me stop reading the comic book.
The new revival or reboot, whatever, of the Buffy comic is written by my friend Jordi Belair, and it's so interesting because it's basically what if Buffy took place today?
Oh, no way.
And so, is Willow more comfortable with her sexuality? Is Jenny Calendar still alive? Stuff like that. It's really cool.
I love that. Well, one of the main things why I'm so excited that you are on this episode is because you have one of my many dream jobs, and you have officially entered the Marvel family. How has that journey been for you? How have you even processed this?
It's so funny because I was just thinking about this yesterday that it still kind of really hasn't hit me because I was approached about writing this book and I said, yeah, great. I think this sounds awesome. And I just kind of started working on it. And then slowly as more news has come out and more stories about the book and what it's going to sort of be involved with, it's starting to kind of hit me this is crazy that this thing that I was so into as a kid that I really imprinted on and kept on with it until adulthood, reading comics and writing comics and turning that into my career, that I now am, able to work with that company. I am overjoyed. I think it's kind of awesome.
So I just finished watching the episode, Earth 616 on Disney Plus. And in one of the episodes, they were talking about these comic book writers who work around the world. And one in particular, he lived in Spain. And he works for Marvel, but he's just drawing comic books all day and then sending that over. So it completely made me think of you.
That's a great series. And there's one about an artist in Brazil, too, that's really good.
How did you find out? How did Marvel reach out to you to be like, Terry, come work for us?
I was sort of writing and researching on my own because there was a Mexican superhero named Hummingbird that I really liked. And I was like, I wonder if one day I could pitch something about her, and her story's really interesting. They haven't really delved into it. And so as I was doing that, I randomly got an email from my agent hey, check this out. And some editors at Marvel approached me about the possibility of writing this superhero, a series for him that was going to be his first solo series. And I was like, one, are you kidding me? Why did they want me? What? And two was absolutely, And then the third thing was like, I've never heard of this character. So it's kind of interesting. And I found that to be like maybe an opportunity that I could like help people recognize or like, you know, be interested in this character that as I got to know him more, I thought was really cool. But yeah, they approached me because I think they had read my my independent graphic novel with Claudia Aguirre, which is Hotel Dare. And that's like a family adventure fantasy kind of book, very much centered around Mexico and just like an adventure sort of young adult graphic novel. But they read that and I think they were like, yeah, he could do this.
Okay, so another thing that I saw with Earth 616, are you going to be doing the Marvel method? So long story short, and correct me if I'm telling this right. So in theory, the Marvel method is how they did comic books way back when, for all the people who don't know. And that it was essentially where the writer writes out what the scene that's happening, and then the artist draws it and then sends it back. And it's just kind of like a longer version of back and forth that kind of makes the writing process not as quick. Is that roughly right?
Yes, that's accurate. My answer is no, I don't do that. When I saw that, my reaction was like, what? Are you kidding me?
How does anything get done?
I'm so type A that like when I write a script, this is actually kind of, I think, a switch for me a little bit. Like when I write a script, I am very specific. I say like page 3, 5 panels. Panel 1 is a horizontal, and I like explain the layout of the page. But I also tell my editor and my artist, that's just the best way for me to get it all out of my head. And if you can think of a better way that's more visually interesting, I don't want you to feel beholden to that, like you must do this. As long as the story and the dialogue still comes across, that's great. And so I've always been really specific in my scripts about what to show and how to show it, because I feel like I've always felt pressed for time. Like, I think time is the most precious thing we have in this world. And so the better I can communicate to an artist what I would like them to do, then I think that's, you know, part of my job. And part of that comes from I have an illustration degree. So I started out in drawing comics and transitioned that into writing. And so I think hopefully that helps too, like being an artist, knowing what, you know, to convey to another artist. I would want to write as specifically and as best as I can for someone else to not feel like there is a lot of back and forth. That's just me, though.
Yeah. So let's backtrack just a little bit, because obviously everyone who listens to this podcast, well, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably a big superhero fan. Let's be real. What was the introduction of superheroes into your life? Like, what was that spark where, like, what cartoon, what comic, like, what was that initial, like, what, and why am I immediately obsessed?
So I'm sure this is a very standard answer, but like many a 90s kid, that Fox X-Men cartoon.
It's the best one. It's the best one. It is. They have yet to do a cartoon as
I agree.
good.
And I went nuts when I saw it. I was like, what is this? This is amazing. I find it funny that as I listen to the theme song, that not a lot of people recognize that it's Whitney Houston's "Whatever You Want From Me, I'm Giving You."
Oh my God, is it?
You will never hear it. You will never hear it the same way again. I'm sorry I ruined it for you.
It is. Did that song come out first?
I think the Whitney Houston's talking about first. It's very similar. It's not the same song, but
it's not. I mean, but like if you write music, like professionally, you know what is the right amount of song to use to change the key or to change or go in a different direction with the note to get away with it and not be copyright. You know this. I hear it with a lot of songs, like on the who listens to the radio anymore. But like when you like download songs and like I can hear that. Oh my God.
Yeah, so I like totally loved that cartoon, and when I realized, you know, I wanted to know more about these characters, and when I realized that there's books, there's comics, there's other stories with them, that led me to go seek those out. The first comic I ever bought with my own money was the 90s. It was an adaptation of one of the episodes of that cartoon, and it was the one with Rogue holding up Pyro like by the throat. And from there I just started reading the Jim Lee run, the Joe Madureira run, like all the X-Men stuff, and that branched out into other comics and lots of other stuff. But that's what sort of brought me to it. Yeah.
No, that was the same for me. I'm still obsessed with that cartoon. And I just remember because that was like prime Saturday morning cartoons for me. But there'd be times where my dad would come and be like, go rake the yard. And I'm like, just give me 30 minutes. Just give me 30 minutes. Let me watch this cartoon and I'll go rake the entire yard. I promise.
You're like, they are fighting Omega Red right now. I'll go in a minute.
That was definitely my main introduction to superheroes as well. And most people nowadays know Marvel because of the Avengers. Mm-hmm. I know them because of the X-Men, the cartoon, branched to the comic books, and then from there, that's when I learned about all the other Marvel superheroes. But, I mean, the MCU is just a thing in itself, and it's amazing. But yeah, X-Men 90s cartoon was it for me. Did you have a favorite superhero?
Does Buffy count?
Buffy completely counts as a superhero. She has saved the world a fair share amount of times.
A lot, right? She saved the world a lot. But
a lot.
I've always loved Buffy, but in childhood it was definitely like Rogue and Jean and Storm, like all the X-ladies. And they did something very smart by having this young, like Jubilee in there so that kids could relate to that and be like, I'm hanging out with these superheroes.
So you know what Jubilee was? Jubilee was our Kamala Khan.
Oh, absolutely.
That is what Kamala Khan is for people who are reading Marvel now.
She was this 90s mall kid. She had like the cool sunglasses. She would say all that slang. That was definitely for us. And it's funny because right now the superheroes that I am really into are like Miles Morales and Kamala Khan. And of course Reptil. But yeah.
All right. So you're coming on as a writer for Reptil. Now, just like you, when you first were talking to me about this series, I'm like, who is Reptil? I have never heard of this character. And he's also Mexican-American. How do I not know who this person is? So can you give our listeners a quick rundown on who Reptil is and his superpowers?
Yeah, so Reptil is Humberto Lopez. I call him Beto. He's a 16-year-old Mexican-American who can turn into dinosaurs because of a magical amulet that he found on a dig with his paleontologist parents. But yeah, he's just this like, I thought when I heard of him, how is this not the most popular character for kids? Like every kid loves dinosaurs, wants to turn into dinosaurs. And I was like, this is a character that's ripe for like a series and for someone to sort of dig into like who he is.
Unless you're kind of like a huge Marvel fan, most people are probably like us and haven't heard of Umberto before. What wider connections does he have to maybe kind of more well-known characters in the Marvel universe?
Sure. There aren't too many, but he was part of the Avengers Academy, and he was actually the team leader of the Avengers Academy.
Yeah, representing.
Yeah. So he had this connection with other members of that team, so like Finesse, Hazmat, some of those other young like superheroes. But right now, he is directly affected by the actions of Vision and Kamala Khan. Okay. So if you're reading the Champions Outlawed series, then it'll sort of be like a good primer for Reptil, because with what happened so Kamala Khan got injured and that set off this new law called Kamala's Law, where teenage superheroes aren't allowed to use their powers unless they have an approved mentor. And if they do, they could be taken away and punished. So that's sort of where his story starts, is thinking, all right, if I can't use my powers, I'm going to, help my grandpa move in with my aunt and sort of focus on family. And of course, things don't exactly go the way he planned.
Is Avengers Academy different from Young Avengers then? Are they like two separate teams?
Two separate teams. Avengers Academy is... actually, it's sort of interesting. There's a little bit of a spoiler, but...
Ooh, yes! We heard it here.
It was run by Tigra and... also, like, Giant Man. Yeah. So, Giant Man, I think, was the one who, like, gave Reptil the team leader position. And the kids in Avengers Academy were brought in because they were like, you're the next generation of superheroes. We want to help you. But the team found out that the reason they were recruited into the Avengers Academy was because they were likely the most likely candidates to actually become super villains.
The people in the Avengers Academy.
The teenagers, yeah. So they were actually brought in to be monitored by adult superheroes, and the kids found this out.
Oh, not misbehaving on my watch.
Right? Yeah.
So obviously, this story means a lot to you. Can you explain why to the listeners, why, specifically the story of Umberto, why it's so important for you and why you're so excited to have this kind of be your intro to Marvel? I
thought it was a really great opportunity when I thought, I don't know who this character is. I was like, that kind of has to be a part of this story, I think. So he's Mexican-American, so am I. I think it's important for the Latino, Latina, Latinx community to have visible heroes. Like, especially at a time when we aren't always seen in a positive light in the United States. We're the largest ethnic minority group in the United States, and we have the least amount of representation. And that's in books, movies, music, like across the board. And pre-COVID, the Latinx community was responsible for 25% of all movie ticket sales every weekend. So that's an entire quarter of the market that, like, that's a lot of buying power. We're supporting stories about other people in other communities that we may not always, respond to as much as we would our own. And so I felt like if I don't know who this hero is, then I want the world to know who he is. And I think, like, there's the idea in the book of how are we supposed to, as Latinos, believe in a better world if we don't have anybody that we can visibly recognize is being that heroic, thing for us that we can model ourselves after. So I hope I pull it off.
It's true, because usually when I was new, I was in an interview and I was just like, okay, so he's Mexican American. I was like, which other Mexican American superheroes are there? And the first hero that came to my mind, who's technically not even Mexican, he's Brazilian, was Sunspot. Like he came to mind, and then I was just like, surely there has to be others. So I'm gonna ask you to think really quick on your feet. So I researched this before, so I made a list because I was like, there has to be more. And there's like a 10 list of like Latino superheroes, and I was actually surprised by some of the ones on the list. I was like, I didn't even know. I want you to list out all the Latino Marvel superheroes that you can think of.
I can name them all.
Okay, so there we go.
There's Red Locust, Fernanda. There's Spider-Man, Miles Morales. There's Ghost Rider, Robbie Reyes. Hummingbird, Maria Araceli Penalba. There's Miss America, America Chavez. The reason I can do this and name them all is because I also made a list. I have a list of every Latinx Marvel character. So there's actually quite a few. But I think that, like, the opportunity to have a solo series is where you get that, kind of to shine. So, like, Nova is a great series about a Mexican-American kid, Sam Alexander, and he's in the Champions as well right now. There's Firebird. There's another Ghost Rider named Alejandra Jones. She's Mexican-American. Living Lightning is Miguel Santos. I mean, I could go on and there's a Kid Ultron.
There's a Kid Ultron?
Yeah, he was in the Runaways.
What?
Yeah. And one of my favorites is the Spider-Girl, Anya Corazon. She's Mexican and Puerto Rican.
Okay.
So that's not even listing off any of the mutants.
What are the mutants? Let's hear the mutants.
Well, there's some. There's Darwin. There's Feral. There's one called Thorn. There's one that I loved in the 90s named Skin from Generation X.
Oh my god, I totally remember Skin.
His name's Angelo Espinoza, yeah. There is, I guess now she goes by Force Field, but that's Cecilia Reyes. She was Puerto Rican. She was from the Bronx, where I used to live. And she was a doctor. She had like Force Field stuff. There's Sunspot, like you mentioned. There's Richter. He's Mexican. There's Gold Balls. I guess he goes by Egg now.
I mean, last I saw he was like one of those Hope's 5 people.
Yes, like the Resurrection 5 people. Yeah, so they found out that his power, they weren't just these round gold things. They were eggs.
They were eggs, as you do.
Right. But there's several more. There's Velocidad, Tempest, Empath. There's quite a few.
I think it's really clever and smart that Marvel has kind of come and grabbed you, a fellow Mexican-American, to come and write the story. Because I think that they've had large success doing that. Because that's one of the other things I also learned with Earth 616 on Disney Plus, is they did the same thing for Miss Marvel, for Kamala Khan, who's the Muslim Pakistani superhero. They hired someone of the same to write her story. And that literally has like catapulted her to being like one of the most popular characters, who was not even well known to begin with.
Yeah, and I think that there's like a good I'm not somebody who believes that someone who isn't Mexican can't write a great Mexican character. I don't think that.
No,
but I think that there is a certain level of authenticity and kind of like things that you may not have to research when you start writing a book if you are a member of that community. For instance, in the comic previously, his parents have called him Berto as like a nickname. But when I read that, I was like, wait a minute. The nickname for Umberto is Beto. So sorry, but his name's Beto now. But like how it's
and we're dropping that
how would
on.
someone from that community who didn't grow up knowing that, like, even think to research that nickname might be, not what's used. So yeah, I feel like I'm in a great team. One of our editors on the book, she's Latina. Our artist is Mexican, Enid Balam. There's some great colorists and inkers working on it. It's a really great, Latinx team, and I'm so excited about it.
Oh my God, I'm so excited to read it. Do you have, like, any ideas on how you plan to bring Umberto's Mexican heritage into the story that you're writing?
I think that in a few ways, it's easy when it's just a part of who he is. Family is very important to him, and we see that in his family that we're introduced to in the book. And we also see it tied to kind of what we just spoke about a little bit. The book explores about like some stuff about how he might need to learn who to be a hero for. Like he also, like, he loves Selena.
I love Selena.
I mean, when her original band name was Selena y los Dinos, how can I not put that in this dinosaur book?
It makes sense. It's there. It is there.
And because he has, been with Avengers Academy, he's been in New York. The comic that he will be in directly before his solo series is a Spider-Man Keenan Black comic, so he's in New York. I'd be dying for some authentic Mexican food now that I'm helping my grandpa move to Los Angeles. Like, that's just what happens. So yeah, I think that it's going to be infused in there. Hopefully it's, feels authentic. I think it does. Yeah, and I just hope that people see that he's Mexican-American and that he's a kid. He's 16.
Yeah, that's exciting. So one of the things that happened when Marvel Comics, just looking back now, it's like hindsight is a brilliant thing. Most of the superheroes Marvel was writing when they first started were predominantly white. And it's only like now, not now, but like in recent years, have we seen more kind of a diverse set of superheroes coming forth in their own series. You obviously have Black Panther, you have Kamala Khan now, and now we have Reptil coming out with, proud Mexican American. So we're having those kind of stories told. So the comic books have more or less kind of caught up to the kind of kids wanting to see themselves represented in the superheroes and the stories that they're reading. And I feel like the MCU is slowly getting there as well. Obviously Black Panther, such a huge movie. Everyone loved it. But then when you kind of start to look at it on paper and all the heroes that have come out, you kind of see kind of maybe like the same trend of, like most of the diverse characters are kind of more like sidekicks. No one's really like leading the charge on their own. Obviously now we know we have Falcon and the Winter Soldier coming. So, Sam Wilson's going to be right there in the start of it. Mm-hmm. Kamala Khan, she has her series coming.
I can't wait.
If Kevin Feige were to walk up to you and was like, Terry, we want to bring the first Mexican-American superhero to the big screen or the small screen, TV. WandaVision was amazing, so I wouldn't mind Disney Plus series either. Who would it be?
I have two that I think would be pretty cool. The first one is one I mentioned. Her name's Araceli. Her codename is Hummingbird. And she has like the powers of an Aztec god. And her story is interesting. She sort of wakes up after having been kidnapped by like traffickers.
Oh, wow.
And doesn't really remember much of her past. So anyone who doesn't remember their past in a superhero story, that is ripe for the picking to write something. Like, you get to explore who this person is, how she got her powers, that's so much about identity that's like a great story to I think, dive into. And especially someone who is Mexican. Like, I'm so sick of when you see Mexico portrayed in, a show or a movie, it's like tinted brown.
This is true.
when what Mexico to me looks like is more like the land of the dead in Coco. It's colorful, it's beautiful, and so I think Hummingbird, she would be really cool. And I also think that if we want to go like sort of Spider-Verse-y, like Miguel O'Hara, who is the Spider-Man in 2099, I think that could be a really cool story. Like, he's sort of like, like the Batman Beyond, but like Spider-Man in the future.
A very good comparison right there.
Yeah, so for him to, I think, be part of that, he was, I think, at the very end of the Spider-Verse movie, like in a little end credits thing. But that would be a cool character to, I think, bring into the MCU, or maybe just to do like a separate TV series that takes place in the future and you don't have to tie it in, it's too strongly yet.
Yeah.
But I'd be like, thank you for coming to me, Kevin. I'm so glad you value my opinion.
But I mean, let's be real. If it was a Reptil series, a kid who can turn... Because at first, he could only transform parts of himself into a dinosaur. Like, he can get, like, velociraptor legs and such. And it's not until later that he could turn to full dinosaur. Can he still turn to fully into a dinosaur? Or was that only, like, it's been changed?
So, he can. He can't always control it well. And that's all I'll say.
Yeah. I mean, if you turn to a T-Rex, like, how do you handle that?
So the reason that he can turn into full dinosaurs and has in the past in the comic is because he was given Pym particles by Hank Pym.
Oh, okay. So he's connected to Hank Pym's Ant-Man.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that. But yeah, so that's why he can sort of turn into big dinosaurs, because his mass would have to increase. But yeah, he can turn into full dinosaurs. He's in the past in the comics, so I guess this isn't ruining anything, but in the past in the comics, when he turns full dinosaur, he kind of hulks out. Like, he doesn't control it very well. The animal mind takes over. So that's, going to be a little part of the story.
Yeah, and I mean, it makes sense. It's definitely part of the journey, because, like, how long was, like, Hulk, like, Savage Hulk before? It's like, okay, we're, like, super smart Hulk now.
Yeah, now we're Professor Hulk.
Now we're Professor Hulk, exactly.
I've got my glasses. Yeah.
Well, I am super excited to read your Reptil series, and for one of our special listeners, we will be giving away a signed copy of the comic book, so we're super, super excited. I want one too, so make two.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I can frame that, so when you, like, go off to, like, even bigger things at Marvel, it's like, I know Terry.
I have a Marvel art package of artwork and stuff I've done that I'm putting together for you. So maybe I'll save it until that first issue comes out, and then I'll send it all together.
Oh my God, please. So me and Terry, for our listeners, me and Terry were geeking out because I used to draw from comic books as well when I was younger. So in one of my past lives, I must have been a comic book drawer. It was one of my many, many dreams to be. Also, I wanted to be just like a drawer for, like, Disney animated films too. But I just didn't.
Me too.
I just didn't pursue it. You know what? I am obsessed with the artwork for Sleeping Beauty. I think, animated wise, that is
gorgeous.
The most beautiful animated film I have ever seen in my life. I think it's so underrated.
I remember my aunt talking about that when Tarzan came out. She was like, I don't understand or see anything that Tarzan is so weird. Why isn't everything as beautiful as Sleeping Beauty?
It is so good. It's a
gorgeous film.
If people wanted to kind of brush up on their Reptil history before the series comes out, what are some comic book storylines they should probably, like, read up on?
So they can read any run of the Avengers Academy. They can also read a run of comics called Avengers Arena, which did not shy away from, this is basically Hunger Games, and we're throwing the Avengers Academy kids into a pit to fight. And one of my favorites is actually a giant size Avengers Academy issue. That's what it's called, Giant Size Avengers Academy. And it's got Spider-Girl, the Mexican Puerto Rican Spider-Girl, on the cover. And they have this sort of flirtation thing happening with her and Reptil in the book. And that's a fun thing to read as well.
Oh, exciting. Well, thank you so much, Terry. It's been amazing having you. And I'm pretty sure this is only the first time we will have you on the Geeky Gentleman. And
I will be back anytime.
Yes! And I can't wait to see what happens with the storyline. And I'm pretty sure I will be DMing you like, what just happened?
I welcome it. I want to hear from everybody what they think.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Terry, and we'll talk later.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And there you have it, gentlemen. All the insider news for the new Marvel series, Reptil. Make sure to check it out. Thank you again for listening to another episode of The Geeky Gentleman. Don't forget to subscribe and rate the podcast. That will always make me smile. If you're interested in supporting The Geeky Gentleman, please look for it on Patreon. I have some extra goodies for all the people who support the podcast. A huge shout out today to one of my Patreon supporters, Mitchell Adams. Thank you again for supporting The Geeky Gentleman podcast. Feel free to drop me a DM on Instagram. I'm at DriftingDCal if you want to nerd out or if you have any questions in regards to men's fashion and grooming. If you want more content from me, feel free to visit my blog at www.driftingdudes.com. And until our next podcast adventure, I will talk at you guys later. Bye.